Thank you all for coming. This is session 8918, and the title is Financial Aid Transformation with Oracle Student Financial Planning, addressing the issue of escalating costs of college education. My name is Jill Palla. I'm with Sierra-Cedar, and we have brought together a panel of distinguished SFP users. They're clients of Sierra-Cedar. They all are in different stages of their SFP implementation, and we thought maybe their stories would be something you'd like to hear about. If we get into some details about SFP and some of our projects, I also have two colleagues, Sarah Erico and Alexander Prendergast, that are here, and they can help us if we have some questions that you'd like to answer. But we'd like it really to be interactive, and I want you to hear the story from our panelists. And so we're going to take a quick minute and introduce you to our panelists. I'll just introduce. We have Marcus Bird from Coppin State University, Lysandra Bryce from Florida A&M University, Marshall Rumsey from Michigan State University, and Ash Haddop from Princeton, and Brian Dixon from University of Texas, Austin. And I'm Jill Palla from Sierra-Cedar. And I have pictures of Alexander and Sarah in the front. I'm going to let you, they're going to introduce their college in a minute, just let you know who our panel is to start with. So a little bit about our projects and why we think we're qualified to talk to you, I guess, about this today. Sierra-Cedar has 10 SFP implementations currently underway. We have 3 of our SFP clients that are actually live and starting on year 2. Loading ICERs, and we have a good mix of this group up on the stage. 5 of our clients are currently going live with the 22-23 financial aid year, so they're loading ICERs and packaging students. And 2 of our clients have begun the implementation cycle for 23-24 financial aid year. Some things you might want to think about or ask. We have some experience up here doing non-Oracle integrations for student systems, either homegrown or maybe another system. I've heard a lot about Genzabar and some other systems, so homegrown also. And then some business process transformation. They all are doing some different levels of business process transformation. You can deploy SFP baseline out of the box. It comes delivered, and it's functionally ready to package federal aid following federal guidelines. And you can do some business process transformation, and you can customize a bad word, but you can make some changes and do some institutional specific things that you'd like to do. And we have a strong, experienced SFP consultant. So let's take a turn and we'll do some institutional profiles, and you can meet our panelists. So Marcus.
Yes, I'm representing Coppin State University, which is located in Baltimore, Maryland. We are inner city HBCU with a population between 2,500 to 3,000 students. I guess one thing I want to add is that me personally, I've worked with PowerPhase, Banner, DataTel Colleague, and a homegrown system, as well as Campus Solutions. So, but everything else is up there. We have the highest Pell number of students in the state of Maryland as well. So that's just an insight that's maybe not up there.
Well, and they started in July of this past year, and they are currently in the throes of going live.
Yeah, have we started packaging yet?
No, you're going to write.
No,
How can I package? I'm here.
I'm probably the reason why we haven't started, but we're getting very close. We do use a third-party vendor for our verification, which is a little different. But we went. Besides that, everything else we went straight out of the box. We didn't really make any modifications.
And one interesting thing, Coppin has a sister school, would you call them, nearby?
We're doing this in conjunction Thanks for helping me out, Chip. We're doing this jointly with Bowie State University, another HBCU, but we're both in the University System of Maryland college system, mainly to help with pricing, but also we're able to feed off each other ideas, and I see some of their challenges and try not to make them mine, and they which I think it gives the two of us, and me and the director, we talk very frequently. So, you know, I think it's give us an idea of when we go live or package what we see differently, and we can have an open line of communication between each other. I think it's very good.
Thank you very much. And now please meet Miss Lysandra Bryce from Florida A&M University.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great, thank you. So again, Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University is the only HBCU in Tallahassee, well, in the state of Florida. It is one of the largest HBCUs, and we actually purchased SFP December 2019. FAMU, we serve about 9,000 students. We have about 60% of our students are Pell eligible, while 90% of our students actually receive some form of financial aid. And so there was a high concern with the administration, with the university, just moving forward in the direction of where we wanted to go. And one of our top priorities was more so moving towards student-centric model, and we wanted to be able to serve all of our students with excellence with caring is one of our models that we live by. And to do that, we had to find a system that can really provide the services that we were searching for. And so we did have a very aggressive timeline when we purchased this product. So again, just to share with you all when we purchased it December 2018, and we did our kickoff February 2020. We went live October 2020, started verification in November 2020, and started awarding for the 21-22 A-year February of 2021. So a very, very, very aggressive timeline that we had. We implemented, we had some challenges, but there are definitely some rewarding services that we're seeing from our students, from our parents, and from the community.
Thank you. And she should have mentioned, as if SFP wasn't enough, they were in the middle of a 9.2 upgrade.
Absolutely.
And the
pandemic.
They started in February. Alexander visited, if you remember, and
yes.
a month later, or no, a week later, or a day later. So delivering an upgrade and an SFP implementation in the pandemic has been. They thought implementations were just too easy, so they had to throw in a pandemic, I guess.
Absolutely. I think every challenge that they can think of was, they were before us, and we had to knock them all down.
Yes. So FAMU is one of our year 2 schools. So they have completed disbursement, gone through end-to-end for a financial aid year, and they're beginning year 2. Yeah. So have some good stories, along with Marshall Rumsey from Michigan State University, another year 2 school.
Good afternoon. My name is Marshall Rumsey. I'm the functional lead for the Office of Financial Aid for the SIS Modernization Project. Similar to FAMU, MSU went live. We started our project in, I think it was March of 2019. In addition to implementing SFP, MSU was also implementing Campus Solutions 9.2. We were replacing a very old mainframe. So the Office of Financial Aid had 6 years previously upgraded our system. At that time, we were using Sigma's ProSam. So I was basically telling our financial aid office that, yes, we're going through another implementation. You have to learn yet another system in a span of 6 years. So Michigan State is the premier land-grant institution. We have an enrollment of just over 50,000, and we historically offer just over $2.1 billion in aid. We are I think we are the only school that actually has 3 medical schools. We have a vet school, we have an osteopathic medicine, and we have a human medicine school in addition to our law school. So with enrollment of 50,000 plus, I think at that time we were the largest school to go live with SFP, and we were the first public university. So when we first decided to start the project in March of 2019, we had very, very, very high hopes. We thought we were going to go live that fall. Little did we know how much work was also involved with the Campus Solutions implementation. A decision was made to basically delay the project for a year while we could get Campus Solutions, that project, a little more stable. At the same time, we were diligently working on bringing SFP up to speed and filling some gaps. We went live loading ICERs in November of 2020 for the 21-22 aid year. Continued to make remarkable progress with SFP, and SFP was maturing along the way from where it was. Campus Solutions came a long way. I'm happy to report that in August we successfully dispersed over $300 million in aid. And then again this past spring we dispersed another $300 million in aid. So I was telling everybody earlier, I had a full head of hair at one point. It has been a very stressful couple of years, but thankfully we've had good partners along the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Marshall. Ash?
Yep. Sure.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ash Hadab, and I work at Princeton in Princeton, New Jersey. So you see some of the facts up there about Princeton. I think the one fact I will point out that maybe some of you may not know is Princeton does not have any professional schools. It is predominantly an undergraduate college. It's all about sort of undergraduate education, but we also have a very strong graduate program. And I think the other thing I want to point out is, as you can see, we have about 5,200 undergrads right now, but we're in the process of increasing our undergraduate enrollment by about 500 students. And a lot of that has to do with sort of making Princeton education accessible and available to a larger swath, right, of socioeconomic, socioeconomically diverse students. And so Pell Grants are becoming sort of a bigger and a more important piece of our financial aid. So the other thing you should know about Princeton is we have a homegrown financial aid system, which is sort of the crown jewel, if you will, of the way Princeton disburses aid. We have a very generous institutional financial aid system in place, but we did need some help to do federal aid processing, and the tool that was in place, which I forget what it was called.
EdConnect.
EdConnect. Wasn't working for us, and so we needed something else to be able to do that, and that's where SFP came along. And so we're really using SFP only for federal aid. I should have introduced myself. So I am the director for ERP, so I manage all of the ERP applications for the university, and the support for SFP falls within my area. So as I look around, I think I'm the only IT person here because no financial aid folks from Princeton are here, and so Jill's stuck with me, right? So I'm sort of an interloper with all of these.
Story, Ash.
Okay, and I don't really know financial aid that well, so please be kind, as I try to muddle my way through this.
Well, but the purpose of our panel is how they got here. And I think, Ash, your story and Princeton's story is, they were struggling with EdConnect and it wasn't reliable for them. And, that you had options. Do you implement, because you have Campus Solutions, do you use Campus Solutions or do you keep going with the free EdConnect? And when they they did an analysis, we helped Ash with an assessment and looked at, what the choices were, and really they needed somebody to give them the federally compliant information. And then working together, how you got it to work with FA Prod.
Yep. So we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. It is a good story. Thank you.
Last but not least, Brian Dixon from Texas.
Last alphabetically, but number one in your heart. No. So Brian Dixon, University of Texas at Austin. I'm the Vice Provost of Enrollment Management, and we certainly have an unlikely story. So 52,000 students or so, University of Texas, flagship, large R1 institution running on a mainframe system. And I was hired last February as the Associate Vice Provost of Student Aid and Affordability. How I got here, a whole nother story. But about 6 or 8 weeks into my employment, we were already in the midst of a an internal audit with the financial aid office. My friend Diane back there, executive director of financial aid UT. There were fundamental problems that we could not fix, and we were also looking at all of the changes with the FAFSA that were coming up in 23 and 24, and we started adding up how much that was going to cost us, and somehow, again, about 6 or 8 weeks, we were able to be in front of the provost and get it to make sense to him, and we got approval and we got the money, and this at the end of August, this past August of 21, we started a project. We have an amazing team, a bunch of great dedicated folks that are really committed to making this successful, and then about next October, November timeframe, we'll be loading in ICERs. As part of this project, the other thing that we did was we got approval to buy a new scholarship system, so that's something else that we're interested in doing. And what I think is unique about the University of Texas is we're trying to figure out how to do affordability on scale. That we have this giant institution, we have these huge partnerships, like with the Dell Foundation gave us like $100 million to give to Pell students. More than 25% of our population are Pell eligible students. We don't always think about that at flagships and Research One, but it's a huge population. They give them computers and $20,000 scholarships and mentoring and all kinds of credits. We have tuition promises, like I'm sure most of you do, but we give out a lot of money, a lot of financial aid, and it's just been so weighty for us to be able to pivot and to be able to take on initiatives for the president and the provost at scale, on top of addressing all the compliance issues. And I would say, like, I have probably some of the most extensive campus solutions experience probably of anybody sitting up here. I started working in campus solutions in 1997. I've done some of the hardest implementations out there. Miles remembers mid-year conversion, National Park Community College. James remembers us shifting everything off of campus solutions at City College of Chicago for a couple of years and going on to Region 8. Like, we've done really difficult, really complicated stuff, and we needed a solo system, a standalone system, to be able to do what our mainframe system couldn't do anymore. We're certainly having conversations, thinking about different ways that we are going to be able to upgrade that, but in the meantime, we needed to pull some of the weight off of there. And the way that I became aware of SFP, I was working at Washington State University with my girl Joy Scurry, who's the new AVP over there. And so I got to see the product there, and it was the only viable solution for us. And happy to have a discussion why that was, but we're not done yet, but we're really excited about the possibilities. Thanks.
And another interesting thing about their project is they are writing the integrations from their legacy system to SFP back and forth, because they're not a campus solution school. So if there are some schools out there that are not campus solutions, they have also some good background on that. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for the introductions. Now we want to get into the discussion topics, and we put together just a few ideas, but I'm happy to steer clear of the slides if you all have some questions. But let's start with, kind of back to our title of our presentation. If everybody could share what motivated your institution to move to SFP, and did escalating costs of college education have an impact in some of that decision? I know some of you mentioned a little bit about why you went that way, but what were some of the conversations at your schools that you had?
I can say at MSU, so as I mentioned, we had a mainframe, and one of the things we were looking at is that mainframe was very expensive to run, and our vendor, Sigma, came to us and said, we're no longer going to support this. So MSU would have had to make a serious investment into the infrastructure of that system. After talking to other schools, we decided, obviously, to go to Campus Solutions. The SFP piece was, we were looking to the future. We do not want to have to make another software change 5-10 years from now. We know that the cloud is where everybody is ultimately going to wind up. So if we could reduce those costs now, then we can help keep our tuition credit hours affordable. MSU also made a pivot to block tuition. We started taking in internal overhead, and one of the overhead pieces that was costing the university a lot of money was the IT maintenance. So by going to Campus Solutions, then ultimately SFP, we're able to pass those savings along to students because we don't have to absorb that cost.
And I would think something that probably all of us can relate to and are familiar with is just sort of the idea of unfunded mandates, right? Like it gets more and more expensive to be in compliance with the federal government, with all the crazy things they ask us to do. And with us being in a mainframe system, all those things had to be written and coded by someone. There was no, sort of magical person somewhere, sort of writing the requirement, addressing the issue or the rule that was in place. And then as far as sort of rising costs, I would say the way that sort of came into play for us was there were a number of affordability initiatives, and I mentioned some of those with our Dell Scholars partnership that we have, $100 million program, our Texas Advanced Commitment. There's lots of initiatives out there to make college more affordable, but we feel like money's only part of the problem. The other part of the problem is how do you get it to students in a timely way and in an efficient way, right? Like they don't have to jump through unnecessary hoops. Things don't sort of fall into dead-end places because you're relying on someone manually to do that process, to do that particular portion of work, or just things are just not intuitive to kind of know where you should go from here. And then that gets to be a lot of labor man hours of them calling our call centers, emailing our folks, and they just get frustrated. And sometimes we lose out on great students because we just made it too hard for them to get their money.
With Coppin, we had changed financial aid directors several times. I may be the longest serving financial aid director in the past 20 years. Chris, am I close? And I've only been there 4.5 years. So things were changing every director that came up there. One of the thoughts that I had coming into the campus is I wanted our counselors to be counselors. Mm-hmm. And what I saw were paper processors. They were processing documents. They were, and I wanted a standardized way that we could process aid so that they can work more about counseling, helping them with scholarship applications, helping them decide if they need to do a dependency override or yes, and build a relationship with their constituents. So SFP brought that answer to me because the federal piece became more standardized, which allowed the counselors coming forward to be a better counselor and have more time to spend counseling our students.
Well, I'll make this very quick. Like I said, for us, it was really about finding a place to process federal aid, replacing that process that we had that wasn't really working for us. And so that's really what we were looking for. And then, as Jill mentioned, really for us, the options were, do we go with Campus Solutions financial aid, which we had never used because we have a homegrown system, or do we look at a SaaS product? And we have some experience with Oracle SaaS products already. We use PBCS, and so it was sort of a logical thing for us to take a look at. And when we did do a deep dive with Sarah's help and others, it was pretty obvious to us that to spend and invest in getting financial aid up and running in Campus Solutions was not the right horse to bet on, right? So we'd rather be forward-looking and go with SFP, and so that's really where we ended up. But for us, it was really about how do we find a way to process federal aid and maintain our compliance.
Well, with everything that the panel have shared with you, I think our institution shares some of those concerns. But one of the main concerns that stood out for Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University was the cost for service. And when you think about how much does it cost to be able to provide excellent service to our students. And what we have learned over the years is that we had a decrease in our enrollment because of cost of service and not being able to provide and perform at optimal level. And based off of those findings, our president wanted to move forward with, again, providing a model that provide excellence service to our students. And so again, we adopted that model, Excellent with Caring, and that was the reason why they wanted to move forward, bringing forth a system that can make it more student-centered, making our student our main focus, giving student, the opportunity to be able to verify, submit their documentation electronically, being able to have a one-on-one counseling sessions with our staff more, so we was pushing our staff from behind the desk, bringing them more forward to provide excellent customer service. So those are some of the, just to point out some of the target points that our administration looked at. They looked at the cost for service. What we had to do to change is our reason why we had to go to SFP.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Great responses. Let's keep the conversation going. And our next topic was with costs increasing, how do you think SFP has improved student engagement and access? What are your expectations? You've touched on some of those things already, but anything else to add?
I can try.
All right.
Okay, so again, not to sound like a broken record, but we have a custom financial aid system, which is where we have our student portal. So really, that's what our students engage with when it comes to sort of looking at their financial aid picture. Having said that, I think SFP did give us sort of more end-to-end visibility into the process, right? So the students that are applying, the whole FAFSA process, I think SFP helped make that much more transparent to the students that are applying to sort of figure out where they stand in the process. So that was definitely sort of an added bonus that I don't know if we were really thinking about when we implemented. Even with the current students, right, sort of being able to see where they stand in that cycle, I think is a huge benefit. And then another huge benefit is the visibility that our back office now has into the overall process. Mm-hmm. So it is much easier for our financial aid folks to access information in a timely manner and then make decisions based on that information. So I think those are some of the sort of the things that have raised the visibility, not just for our students, but also for our back office folks.
Awesome.
Okay, absolutely. For FAMU, I know a couple of key points that was pointed out with our administration at our institution was, in addition to what you shared, we actually looked at how can we help our students make more or better informed decisions about borrowing loans. Providing a system where our student had real-time visibility was so important. Having the student and parent get more involved and engaged into their financial aid eligibility, not just for on a yearly basis, but for the length of their academic career was so important. Is the reason why are some of the benefits that we are seeing from our students on a student perspective. And another good thing, and I kind of wrote some notes down, just looking at, with cost increasing, with so many options out there for students to actually take, advantage of, what SFP is doing is bringing our students back in, and, having that university college experience is so important. So with that, we had to, we wanted a system, give them, again, I'm gonna say real-time visibility. We wanted the students to be able to submit their documentations, electronically, so that student knows at the time they're submitting that documentation, the status of that documentation. We wanted a system that was able to receive the documentation and then award students same day. Verification, simplifying verification process was definitely a bonus when we were looking at our system and looking at what all the services that SFP borrowed. Offered. And one of the things that, we actually did as an institution, we took a lot of the challenges that we have heard over the years And those became our benchmarks of where we wanted to cross off to say we succeeded with moving forward in a direction of a cloud-based system.
I would just add, and this is really expectation, is communication. It's really improving our communication flow to the student. Things are triggered, which I guess it should have normally been triggered anyway, but some of the processes in our office had gotten broken. Prior to SFP, and I'm be honest, and I've told Jill this, is I didn't originally want to go with SFP. I originally wanted to get a consultant, Sierra-Cedar, come in and do an evaluation maybe for several months and just rebuild our system from beginning to end. But going to SFP provided that same review of our financial aid process, and some things they didn't have to review because it was built into the system. So I looked at it as improving our communication to the student when they were missing something, or if they needed to provide, give me an example, Jill.
Documents.
I say documents, but even I'm gonna give, even knowing they have a financial aid award, you know, sometimes some of those processes had got broken where they wouldn't know that they had received the award, but the student would just automatically check into their portal. So with this being standardized, you know, in the complete system, I didn't have to build any repairs on my backside. I could just implement the system, expectation, and it would deliver all that a system should do when we're trying to notify our students. So for me, it was about communication to the student, and that's the engagement that I wanted to see.
I think it also forces the business office to reevaluate your processes. It forces you because one of the things that we did on day one is we came up with 5 guiding goals of our project and our project team. And goal number 1 was do not fight automation. And you can do one of 2 things with SFP. You can spend all of your time and all your resources fighting the automation, or you can learn to deal with the automation. And whether that means reevaluating your business processes and your personnel, and the time you're spending on that is a huge drain to many offices. So if we kept going back to the stop fighting automation, what does that mean? Okay, well, we're doing this process. Let's stop doing that process. Do we need to do this process? So by leaning up your business office and your processes and finding ways to not fight the automation, ultimately frees up time, frees up money, frees up everything else that you can now spend on student engagement, and which is what you're supposed to be doing. Our office at MSU was it was divided. It was 25% was student facing up front. We had a set of double doors, and 75% of the office was behind. We flipped that. Because we did not fight the automation, I was able to put more counselors in front of students to help them, to guide them, to answer those difficult questions. Previously, we didn't change the number of students at MSU, but what had happened was students would get into a queue and they would get frustrated because the help wasn't there, because that help was behind the doors doing processes, fighting the automation. So by freeing that up, I was able to see more students, engage more students, streamline the process and their access to aid. So I would say don't fight the automation and try to lean up your business processes, which will in turn save you money.
I would say at the highest level, we're at a point where, I'm sure you've all had this experience where, you know, you keep hearing the system won't do that. The system can't do that. That's not something that the system does. That's just how the system works, right? You hear these conversations on a regular basis, and it gets to be really frustrating because it's not like it hasn't occurred to all of us on how we can make a better student experience, right? But we feel constrained, we feel handcuffed, we feel stuck, we feel like our institutions haven't made the right investments in order to improve those experiences. And I think what's a little unique about the University of Texas is it was about a month ago or so that our student government leaders actually had a meeting with the provost and actually demanded that we upgrade our our student information system, that they were just frustrated. And you probably have not had that experience, right? Like most people probably don't even pay attention to what it is, right? But like our students were just frustrated on the experiences, the unnecessary steps that they were having to go through. And, you know, it's really the students have driven, you know, us having to develop a roadmap on, you know, what to upgrade and when to upgrade that, because, you know, students are saying, hey, we're spending a lot of money for this education. And these are essential services that really, I feel, got exposed during the pandemic, right? Like, it's one thing if you're like, yo, you just drop by the office, right? But like when you shut the whole office thing down and everybody's dependent on the self-service and the web services or whatever, you know, various of our weaknesses were exposed. And, you know, it became clearer and clearer that, you know, we got to invest in those things. It's just not going to be okay to figure out everything via paper and figure out everything, you know, sort of via, if you stop by, you know, we can go ahead and fix that, or, you know, come back in 2 weeks, right? Like all the things that we've all dealt with. I think that's what the reality. So our expectation was streamline. Our expectation was hopefully lower some of our technical debt footprint. You know, our expectation was, you know, that our business owners, our business offices would be able to have ideas that we could implement in a quicker and a more straightforward fashion, as opposed to, that's going to be a year before we can look at that. So, sorry, come back later, right? Like, so we're trying to break through all those things.
We may or may not be having technical difficulties. Phew. Break a sweat there for a minute.
We got it right.
I'm sorry, Brian, were you done? I should have paid attention. I didn't mean to be disruptive. I may or may not have influenced Marcus to try SFP. I will be confess to that. But, you know, I think he saw in all reality, you know, he was coming to us for help with Campus Solutions. And it kind of came to the point of, you can keep putting money into that, but, you know, with a small staff and, you know, probably a better place to put some of their money, because, you know, between financial aid doesn't always get a whole lot of money, and it just seemed at the time that it was going to serve them better. And if, when you do have a small staff, and if there is some turnover, you know, teaching somebody a new system like Campus Solutions, I kind of told Ash the same thing. It's much different, much harder. I will also say, for those of you who are thinking about this, that I would, an SFP implementation is probably easier and shorter than a Campus Solutions implementation. So many different pages. I mean, I love Campus Solutions, but so many different pages and how they fit together and all that other kind of stuff is, it's just a different, implementing in the cloud is just really a different thing. Brian, you've seen both sides of it too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would say, you know, one of the things that all of us kind of know and recognize is there's a need to sort of re-engineer businesses that just happen with implementations in general, right? That we all collectively get layers and layers and layers and layers of paint, but it's kind of like the devil we know, right? Like, so it's kind of like, do I really sort of walk away from that and start from scratch? But I don't know how long you've been in this industry, in this area, but I'm sure that you've at least observed that the cadence of change, especially technical change, has exponentially increased for all of us. And so it's like, we can, just like Marshall was saying about sort of SFP automation, we can either embrace it, right, like I said, or we can just sort of let it sort of drive us all collectively crazy. And then so from our perspective, we're like, this is something that has to get done, and the longer we delay that decision, the longer we delay that process, the harder it's going to be. And we were talking to our friends over at University of Florida, and they were sort of saying, well, we just did the Campus Solutions in 19. And I just sort of warned them, like, I know your folks need some breathing room, but the longer they stay, it's like if you've ever moved from a house after you've lived in there 20 plus years, right? Like, the more stuff that you accumulate, the harder it is to be able to leave and to know which stuff to take with you and which stuff to get rid of.
Good? All right, let's try the next one. How has SFP helped with automating processes within your office? Some of this is repetitive. Maybe this is some of you that are live.
I can take that. That's verification it's automated that process entirely for us. So MSU was very, very paper-based in everything that we had done. We did not accept electronic signatures on paper documents. Everything had to have a wet signature on it. So as you can imagine, going to SFP, where everything is a digital upload, was an eye-opener. It actually drove our compliance officer to retirement early because it was such a change. But it has definitely helped that process, and especially when COVID, the pandemic hit, being able to snap that picture, that isn't a truly automated process, and it was a vast improvement from where we were previously.
As we're new school, so we haven't started packaging yet, but it's made us evaluate how we do our processes. So at every turn, I'm saying, well, do we want to continue to do it that way, or do we want to go to a more automated process? Parent Plus loan we just had that discussion, where the parent can complete the information. It's more automated. Previous, like right now, I have a counselor that has to gather the information and manually input the information for every parent for a Parent Plus loan. I'm a small school now.
It's a judgment-free zone.
So, and we've discussed that. I don't want, and I'm really asking the question I already know the answer to. I'm asking my staff, do we need to continue to do it that way? And if we don't, let's change. And so that's what we're looking at every step. We're looking at how can we improve the process at every step.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just add very quickly, so Princeton, the financial aid office, is a very high-touch sort of operation, right? They sort of want to spend most of their resources on the student-facing functions. So the back office folks are stressed. They're overworked. There's a lot to do. And they were spending an inordinate amount of time on, hope I say this right, federal loan disbursement and the verification process that you talked about. So I think both of those, we have realized with the implementation of SFP that they're spending significantly less time on those things, and that allows them to, I guess, focus on other things. So
That's the
yay.
age-old issue in financial aid. I mean, when we get new regs and that kind of stuff, who do we turn to? We don't get more staff, right? So we turn to automation and we turn to IT to help us. And it's also, the chicken or the egg, which came first. If you keep your processing up to date, it's easy to talk to the student. If your processing falls behind, you spend all your time trying to explain to a student why it's behind. So it's the automation is a nice thing.
Yeah. Well, for FAMU, one of the things I can definitely say that our experience, we actually had to step back and look at each staff member daily duties and responsibilities, what they were responsible for. And when we were in Campus Solutions, we had one person who had to run jobs every single day to make sure that inbound, outbound process were occurring daily so that we can move forward with authorization and disbursement. We had another person who was responsible for master promissory note and interest counseling updating in Campus Solution. And when we, implemented SFP, those duties went away. And so now we are at the stage of reevaluating what duties do we want to put in black and white our staff will be doing besides customer service. Because again, what we hired them to do, they don't have to do anymore. Along with the MSU, I remember my first year coming into financial aid at FAMU, and they had this nice office. It was the only office that had a closed door and a lock key and stuff to it. And I was like, well, and they were like, 2 people worked in there. And I'm like, well, what do they do, right? And I walked inside one day and seen all of this paper, and I was like, oh my God, I have gone back 80 years, way before my time, right? And that's one of the things that we require for verification. And in our office, we had the largest verification team because they had to look at each document and make sure the signatures were there as as mentioned, and make sure that the information was reported correctly. And it definitely delayed the time of actually dispersing students. It definitely delayed time of, servicing our students with excellence. It delayed the time of a student going through that financial aid process. And with that shift going into SFP, we see now that master promissory notes are received, interest counseling is received same day. We see Parent Plus loan, the requirements for Parent Plus loan, that information is received. And it doesn't require an individual sitting there monitoring this information on a day-to-day basis. So it took away and removed a lot of our staff daily responsibilities, which is definitely a plus.
I think it's important, though, to note that we repurposed what they were doing, because don't get me wrong, this is still a growing product, so there's opportunities that we're still able to use them other places.
That is a very good point, because people start to get worried about, what am I going to do if I don't have to push the button to run all these processes?
Our office thought that SFP was going to get them out of a job, like they were going to be let go, and that is not the case at all. I'm actually hiring like I've never hired before, so that's a good thing.
So I have a couple more questions that we can cover, but I hope you're getting a good flavor from the kind of the different use cases and what these different schools have done. Are there some questions in the audience that we would like to entertain for the panel?
I was going to ask before you go across the financial aid staff, you just answered it. That is a big program. You have our institutes, you have 30 to 50 people, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm not pushing the button.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at something.
Yeah.
So SFP didn't remove their jobs. SFP simply allowed them to either spend more time with the student, which is usually their primary function, right? Like the 60% of their daily duties, or they're helping push the system a little bit further.
Absolutely.
And I don't know about everybody up here, but our office had not previously done R2T4. It was done by the controller's office. So when we went to SFP, because SFP automatically does R2T4, our office just took that responsibility on. So I've been taking the processing staff that was normally doing that processing. They are now my R2T4 team, because we're still having to do hand calcs in certain situations, and we're having to monitor these files going through. So we have, like I said, repurposed and reallocated staff. They are now doing different roles and responsibilities, because SFP might have automated one function, but we took on something else, like fellowships or R2T4.
I would just add that it actually helped repurpose me because I'm not monitoring the system as much and making sure that everything is working. That's my expectation. So, am I close to you? But it repurposed me where I can look globally and more enrollment management as far as helping increase enrollment. How could we take on more scholarship opportunities? How can I, just being available to think beyond making sure our processes are working properly. So, that's what I'm expecting, and I'm getting there, and I'm seeing where it's going to happen, where I'll be able to spend more time looking at a global approach to financial aid versus just the processing inside the office.
You bring up a good point. I think also it's important, Marshall alluded to it as well, but how you work with other offices. So Marcus, you had when students get their credentials to log into SFP, because we're putting a great portal out there for students and the timing of that. So some of the things that you're doing with the project also give you an opportunity to, to work out other processes on campus.
Right. So what she's referring to is prior to our director of admission arriving, which she just arrived in the middle of this project, we gave, if you were accepted, we sent credentials out, which I agree with. I think that's the way we should do it. That process has been changed now to only those that have agreed to or who have paid their acceptance enrollment deposit, yes. So they don't get their credentials now until their enrollment deposit. So we had to come up with different ways to make sure they have access. I think we're actually printing a letter for our first-time students, which I didn't have a problem with that. But I like the fact that we're printing a letter, but at the same time, it's going to give me time to convince her that we need to give credentials to everybody that's accepted. And I think that's the standard. I'm sure all of you. But she's new. I have a new president. You know, I'm trying to fall in line at the same time, too, so my politics has got to be right. And I'm also serving as interim VP for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, co-interim VP for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management with the Director of Admissions. So we have some challenges, but let me get SFP up and running, then I'll take on the next battle, which this allow me time to. I will add that I have a very small office. And I'm operating, I think, right at about 50% right now. And we're still doing the implementation, and everything seems to be, you know, moving right ahead. I do see where we can make improvements, and then as I bring on new staff, I won't have to show them both ways.
That's probably the biggest part of an implementation from what I can see. It's the knowledge transfer. There's still, you know, the configuration decisions and things like that, and how to make your business processes, you know, is it something that's a policy or is it something someone's just said for 20 years you have to do? So making sure, Marshall, you said it best, I think, have the system work for you versus you trying to fit your, you know, round peg in a square hole.
I'm sorry, I'm a talker, so I'll just tell y'all that now. Succession planning is really a big deal with me in the small office. And like I said before, I feel like I haven't been there that long. It seems like the years go pretty fast. But every time someone left, processes were broken. Processes were I came from a PeopleSoft school. I was at Alabama State University prior. And Coppin does things a little bit different than Alabama State did. So some things I thought were happening were not necessarily happening. And so as I dug deeper in there, I said, okay, I need to make sure that my setup is the same every year. And that was, you know, that was really the turning point for me, is that even with, and I didn't do the setup. My associate director was doing the setup. Every year it was a little bit different. I had a new challenge every year, and it was working me to death. So being able to have a standardized way, I know that if I leave next year, I'm not, Chris, y'all, you know, I'm not saying I'm leaving. But I didn't want the next person to run into the challenges that I'm having, and my students to run into the challenges, because every time something was broken, I had a student that wasn't receiving services, or they weren't receiving notification, or they weren't receiving their financial aid award. So succession planning is really key to why SFP was very important to me, and making sure that we were able to provide consistent service and access to our students.
Sometimes I've seen where when financial aid is down staff, it turns and some of that responsibility more and more falls on IT. And if you don't know financial aid regulations and that's fallen on IT, that can be a problem for schools too. I don't know if you guys have seen that. So we are down to about 4 minutes. Do we have any other questions in the audience, or should we go? Yes, sir. Let me repeat the question, so because I think it's on the recording. So the question is, what has the student response been to SFP?
I will say that, like any other system, 95% of the process worked just fine. And students rarely come into your office and shake your hand and say, hey, everything was great, thanks. Like, good job. Like, that doesn't happen. We're in business for the 5%, for the 2%, 1%, whatever it might be. The students that it works fine for, great. It's been awesome. The students that we've had learning curves and we've had self-inflicted issues, we've had SFP issues, it's not great, but that's to be expected. What they want and what they deserve and need is communication throughout the whole entire process. And I don't care what you're doing system-wise, you just have to keep them in the loop and provide timelines and provide alternatives. So MSU has spent a lot of donor funds this past year making things right, justifiably. So it was a learning curve. Fall was brutal. Spring got better. I'm hoping that summer they're pretty non-existent. We've learned a lot. We also now are much more proactive as opposed to reactive, and the system is just, by its nature, we're learning along with it. So there is always going to be students who think it's the system's fault or it's MSU's fault, whatever it might be. But I think overall, the fact that we dispersed over $600 million, that tells people it's working. So it's putting the money in the students' hands faster, paying off bills faster. So that's what we can hope for. I don't know if anybody else had a...
Well, for FAMU, I can definitely say we had a roundtable discussion on how we had to, educate our community about our new system, and that was very, very important. And we knew the old way of doing it, just sending out notification, wasn't enough, because the new system changed the entire perspective, our outlook on how students submit documents, and that students doesn't have to necessarily come in our office anymore just to submit or hand a document. And change was change is a definitely interesting concept that you have to definitely get across to your students, get across to the parents and the community for them to be able to receive that information and be able to provide or perform as required. So what we actually did as an institution, initially we sent out notification. We did a splash page on and Campus Solution. So each time a student logged onto their page prior to us going live, they had a splash page that informed them that we are implementing a new system. So that was our first wave of knowledge, information, or getting that information out to our students and the community. The next thing we did a FAFSA notification, and we communicated with all of our students if we have received their FAFSA as well as if we have not received their FAFSA. And in that communication, we also added, we are implementing a new system. So that was our second wave of communication to our students. The third wave of communication, we actually did videos. And so those videos gave students a step-by-step process of how they, are to sign on to SFP. It gave them a step-by-step process of how to submit documents. And it also allowed our staff, if there's something that we received that was unacceptable, we were able to communicate with our student, and the students received that information, in real time, and was able to make those changes. And so that kind of shifted a lot of the pointing fingers at financial aid, saying, "Hey, it's financial aid fault," to what did I do wrong? And that's one of the, that's some of the feedbacks and responses we're getting from our students and getting from our parents, just that learning curve. And so moving forward, we're now looking at, different ways of how we can actually enhance our videos so that it's just not just so informative, saying, "Hey, click here," but it's more entertaining to our students, engaging into what they are interested in today's time.
I was going to say, make sure you have a student advisory group.
Absolutely, yes.
Make sure
That's
if you're
so very
implementing to
important.
include
Yes.
your students, and not just 10, because that's all you could find. Open it up to all of your student populations as much as you can. And I would also encourage them to also be a part of Oracle's student advisory group for SFP.
Absolutely.
I'm sure Jill's going to wrap us up, but I think what this specific last question really points out is there's a great opportunity to learn from experiences of others, right? And I always used to say that to my kids, you can read a book and learn, or you can experience it through life. So I mean, the information that's been shared is sort of a book worth of wealth. And what I take away from this last piece for us who haven't gone live yet is we're really thinking about how do we manage those expectations? How do we maybe earmark some funds, realizing that maybe some things aren't going to go quite according to plan? How do we let leadership know about some of those things that could be happening? And then how do we communicate with students all the things we tried to do to mitigate what potentially could go wrong? So I think there's some really great lessons here, and hopefully this was helpful to you as well.
Thank you for wrapping that up. Make my job easy.
Right.
funds. Thank you very much for attending, and thank you to our panel. You guys have been great. Appreciate your sharing everything that you've learned.